Kia ora. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora.
Welcome everybody for translation to the business of today. It's my pleasure to open the Prosperous Napier Committee meeting for the Thursday the 24th of September. And do I have any apologies? There being nil. Welcome Councillor Tapani. Any conflicts of interest? No public forum? Any announcement by the Mayor? No announcements by myself. Management? All management? The Chief Executive? Confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the Prosperous Napier Committee meeting held on Thursday the 2nd of July 2020 be taken as a true and accurate record of the meeting. Do I have someone to move? Councillor Price, seconder. Councillor Brown, all those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Any minor matters not on the agenda that we need to discuss? No. We will move to item 1, which is the Gloucester Street legalisation. Ryan? You. Okay, we'll ask the Director of Corporate Services to make a short introduction to this. It's pretty much a compliance matter.
Yes, that's correct, in through the chair. So this is just a Public Works Act acquisition, so that council may in fact widen the road over time. So this allows for the purchases of that land under the Public Works.
Are there any questions in relation to this? Do I have someone who will move the recommendation that Council resolve pursuant to section 114 of the Public Works Act 1981 to consent to the land described in the schedule below to be declared road and vested in the Napier City Council? Do I have a mover? Councillor Price, seconder. Councillor Wright, all those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 2. Procurement update, and I'd invite Sharon O'Toole to speak to this. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. So today this is really just an opportunity to update Council about some of the things that we're doing in that procurement space.
Could you just
Move
bring
this
it?
closer.
You're very soft spoken.
Not often that's said. That better? So procurement here means the whole process from beginning right through to acquisition of goods, services, construction, through to the end of a contract or the end of an asset's life. So what I'm going to talk about is what we're doing with the procurement small p stuff, so the nuts and bolts of how we go about things, but also the big P procurement, the more strategic things that we're trying to achieve. The first part of the paper that you have before you talks about the regulatory framework. That's the rules and legislation that we need to comply with within local government and the broader public sector. So this really just demonstrates the standard to which we're held to at Council in terms of how we procure and manage contracts. And in terms of spend, Council spends around about 100 million each year on goods and services. That's both OPEX and CAPEX spend, and that's set to increase quite significantly over the next few years, particularly in that capital infrastructure space. So in terms of evolution, most people realise now that the cheapest price doesn't always equal the best quality. And more recently, we've seen a change in focus to look at value for money, and that's looking at both that quality aspect and the cost. Now there's a move nationally and across the elected members to look at public value. So what does public value mean? That's really what secondary benefits can we also gain by considering good quality, good price, and good outcomes. So by good outcomes, we mean looking at that through an economic lens. So can we create more jobs, for instance? Cultural gains. So that could be working with Māori, looking for environmental outcomes such as reducing waste or greenhouse gases, and also social outcomes. Can we encourage youth development in terms of how we award contracts or look at apprenticeships? What opportunities can we seek? We're already doing, oh, it's gone off now. Hello? So we are already doing this, and there's a couple of examples that you'll see in the paper that I've put before you. So with some recent projects, we were required through the funding agreement to incorporate some social outcomes in there, and that was around how could we stimulate the local economy and provide some support for people who'd lost their jobs due to a COVID-related downturn. And within those contracts, there was a requirement to work with MSD to provide opportunities for those people. Now, those contracts are just in the process of being awarded, and that's worked really well. The second example is from a few years ago. It was selected mainly because I think it's a great example where council partnered with Māori and other agencies such as the Department of Conservation to deliver both cultural, social and environmental outcomes through the development of a pathway at Otatarapa. These are both great examples of what we can and have achieved. The approach, however, at the moment has tended to be more on a project-by-project basis. And I believe that if we become more strategic and build that thinking into our business processes, that we could achieve more. There may be opportunities at the moment that we're missing, and that strategic approach could help avoid that. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to have those good foundations, and I've provided some examples of where we're looking at the tools that we use, but really what that does is make us more efficient at what we do. We also need to make sure that we're effective, and to become effective, we need that strategy piece, and that really helps provide the link between our policy and what we're doing to make sure that we're doing the right things. A strategy will also help ensure that we focus our resources where they'll gain the most benefit and how we'll go about achieving our policy expectations. So to develop an effective procurement strategy, we need the right people involved. We also need sponsorship from council and from our senior leadership team. We need to understand what we're already doing and doing well, but also what others are doing and how can we learn from them. If we start to consider where we can get most benefits, that's to look at, we might not take the opportunities to look at those broader outcomes on everything we do. We need to make sure that we focus on the right things, and we can do that by thinking about some of the high spend areas, because often they provide more opportunity to leverage and get those broader outcomes. The high influence areas where we can work with the willing to make a difference. We need to look at council's priorities to make sure we're focusing on the right things, and also market capabilities to make sure that the market is prepped and ready to be able to support what we're trying to do. And also the size of our procurement activities. So sometimes with enough scale and heft, there are more things that we can do. So today this is really just to socialise what we've been doing and what we can do, and that I really look forward to working with you on developing that further. Any questions?
Thank you. Just before I invite questions, I'd just like to congratulate you, Sharon, on this paper.
Thank you.
And on this the work that you're doing in this field. I think it's a major step forward and a great advance for the council and between the governance and the officers. And just congratulations. I think it's very well explained, and I now invite questions from councillors. Ms. Mayor Wise.
Thank you through the chair, and yes, fully support the comments that you've made there around the report, what's been done to date and the suggested next steps. I note in the paper there is reference to reporting and procurement spend analysis and
Yes.
a report that has been developed. Is the intention for that to come through in our quarterly report to council?
No current plans, so it's been developed primarily at the moment. Tend to find that a lot of the reports, non-procurement focused, are around budgets versus actual. The focus of this is really who are the suppliers that we're using, what do we buy from them, who's using them, do we have multiple suppliers where we're getting the same types of goods and services. So a lot of it really is just to understand what our supply base currently is and whether there are some opportunities to do that slightly different. So it's more intelligence at the moment. It could be shared, but I think we'd probably need to do a little bit more work first to gain the benefits of that intelligence.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the work that's been done on this. It's great. I see that it was initiated by a comment in our audit last year and comments from the Auditor General right across the local government chief executives. First of all, are we confident that we've met those requirements? And secondly, is this a model that's being used by other councils or have we developed it ourselves? Thank you.
I think I'll capture those as sort of several questions. Yep. So in terms of the auditor comment, there was a letter that the Auditor General sent out to all councils, and I think that was following, they were seeing consistently that there were some areas that definitely weren't strengths within local government, and it was really a prompt to try and do a bit more and do better in that space. That probably wasn't the trigger, but it certainly helped gain some attention within council for some of this work. So my role is a relatively new role at council. I've been here for about 14 months, and I think part of creating that new role was in recognition that we could be doing more work in this space. So we'd identified that as a council prior to those comments coming through. Could you just remind me what those other questions were?
The other question was about other councils. Is this a model that they're all using, or is it one we've just developed quite unique to
I think it's
our own
a
council?
trend that we're seeing across many councils. So those broader outcomes are encouraged by central government. The version that we would see within local government is the four well-beings coming back in. Those really map to each other. So we're required through local government to give consideration of those four well-beings. This really just provides a framework on how we can do that. And some councils are probably slightly more advanced, but we're all looking at the same type of approach.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Kia ora, Sharon. Thank you very much for this paper. You can see your enthusiasm for the right outcomes on the paper. My question is around, that public value. When we drill that down into those four kind of wellbeing outcomes, how do we embed that in process change in council? I know you and I have talked about building that into some of our major projects that we're working on at the moment, but how do we bed that down into the kind of everyday procurement and what is, as you actually work through it, quite a complicated decision up front around what outcomes you're going to pick to be your biggest opportunity?
So not an easy question to answer, but I think my view is there's two ways of approaching it. So that strategy is really to look at what is our forward pipeline of work, what projects do we have coming through, and which of those could we earmark to gain some of these opportunities. Now at that stage, it's well-intentioned. It doesn't necessarily translate to achieving those results. So what we also need to do is to look at what supports those activities at an operational level and make sure that we've operationalised our policy or our strategy within those documents. So we have to some extent done that more recently with, I think, the first example. So PGF funding requires that those outcomes are incorporated into both the tender documents and the contract documents, that there's a reporting framework to measure and monitor that they're being achieved. And that was a really great way at pace to make sure that we had a pilot that we could use. And I think the intent is, I don't think anybody gets it right first time. I think we continue to tweak what we do and how we do it to make sure that it becomes more effective.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have a follow-up question around the economic good outcome. Do you see that where local procurement sits inside that space?
In part. I think in general, the view I like to give is to look at local procurement, but also the question sometimes could more appropriately be what local benefit do we gain? And that's a slightly different emphasis.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Support the comment so far, speaking in favour of the report and the recommendation. But my question is around measures of success for once this policy is implemented. So, will you most likely be drawing those measures of success from the... No, these are two separate questions. What do you think are going to be the measures of success around the application or implementation of this policy or strategy? And just to follow on from Her Worship's question around the data report that you referred to earlier on, said could be circulated. I realise that probably in its current form it's not going to illuminate a contextual understanding, but at some stage I'd love to see a link between that report being brought to Council and those measurements for success. So just back to our measurements of success.
So I think in simple terms, what we need to do, as I've mentioned, is to try and operationalise so that if we're asking questions within a tender document, that we've actually got some reporting back. So if, for instance, we're looking at job creation or whatever that measure be, that we embed that within the contract documentation. The reporting that we're looking at the moment, I'm not sure is going to be the right tool to demonstrate that success. Ideally, to be able to look quite in depth at some of that performance measurement, it would be supported by tools like a contract management system, which we don't yet have. So it would be done by individual contract managers. Pulling that together through manual processes is a little bit tricky. It doesn't mean that the activity is not happening. It just means collating that information can be tricky.
Very exciting and still a growing space.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Yeah. Try and phrase this correctly, hopefully. Thinking along the lines of monetary costs, this is a big change, introducing the 4 well-beings to procurement. Has there been any work done to show perhaps what the financial cost percentage might be as an increase, if there's going to be all sorts of measures and training and perhaps other things other than what we would have measured in the past, which would have been the straight procurement cost? Has there been any work done on how the cost may elevate?
I think there's 2 types of costs. So one that you're talking about is the internal costs of training.
Well, I'm just looking at the financial costs really overall, not necessarily the other benefits. Or at the end of the day, someone has to pay.
Yes.
And by adding in all these things, all I can see is the actual dollars going up.
And I think you're right. If we ask for more in general, it costs more. And I think that's the piece about making sure that we focus on the right type of projects that have sufficient budget. So some of those, perhaps at the moment, those beacon projects that are quite significant in spend, where we have the time to be able to upskill staff and also use the market to gain these. I guess it's looking at that broader perspective around, so if we look at an environmental outcome, that could be through a building and making sure that it's more efficient. So looking at its operational costs, how it uses energy, and looking more holistically through across the life of that asset. So while some of the initial costs may increase, it doesn't always translate to an overall increase in total cost. But if we are looking at some benefits, depending on what those benefits are, in some instances it will cost more. There's a focus on improving working conditions and health and safety. So to some extent, it's council also showing that we're doing the right thing for the community and our contractors.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
And just through the chair, just a further comment in relation to Councillor Tapani's question around, the policy side of things. So at the moment, council does not have a formal procurement policy that is in development, and we've got a contract policy that we is our playbook at the moment. But as things are, and Sharon is bringing effectively an update to you, that we are progressing this in the background, and that we will have a more holistic and well-rounded policy that, as you talked to, is an end-to-end process around procurement as opposed to contracts.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay, the officer's recommendation is that this committee note at the update on procurement and contract management at council with particular reference to broader outcomes. Do I have someone? Councillor Brown and Councillor Crown. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Brown?
Yes, I would. As you know, I'm a fan of donut economics, and this I see as a huge way for us to actually move towards that space. I see this as a key way that we can leverage what we already do to take a more holistic view on what we can do, on what is best for our city. And it's a way that we can influence the well-beings indirectly rather than necessarily doing it directly. And I'm really excited to see the synergies and the value add that we can bring to the city through this approach. And I also fully endorse Ms O'Toole's measured approach, that we grow into this process. Yes, I'd probably jump in with 2 feet and it wouldn't be the right thing to do. So support the motion wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Councillor Crown.
Kia ora, thank you. Absolutely tautoko Councillor Brown's kōrero. Even though I feel as though we are being prompted as a local government group to better consider this type of broader outcomes and a holistic view in regards to these things, I think it's evident that we are attempting to not be just governed by that, and to actually take the steps ourselves and put resource into developing a policy which will eventuate in making sure that our assets actually deliver not just economic value but social and cultural value to our community ongoing. So I think that it's a fantastic step forward. I commend the staff. As Councillor Brown said, we're both very committed to the idea of a circular economy and making sure that our investments are effective across the board in all areas of our community wellbeing. So I see this as a really positive step forward.
Anybody else like to comment before I put the motion?
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Tapani.
Just to reiterate the comments from Councillor Brown and Councillor Crown, and that is, as I mentioned in the opening statement of the officer's report, that the council invests $100 million in our local economy. That's a significant chunk of money circulating not only here in Napier but our neighbouring regions. So the ability to develop a procurement policy which looks at meeting not only our business needs but connecting our staff with potential training and development capacity and capability building at an individual and a community level, opening up opportunities for our locals to be able to consider tendering for different services and products, I think is a great way to link our $100 million of expenditure to opportunities at a home and suburb level. So congratulations on this developing work, and I look forward to seeing where it ends up.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's 3 in favour. Anybody wish to speak against the report? There being none, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank
Move
you.
to, thank you, Sharon. Item 3, the lease of reserve Hawke's Bay Hockey Artificial Surface Trust at Park Island. Deborah, I believe.
Sorry, folks, you've got me today instead of Brian, but I'm sure we'll be able to answer the question. So it's a lease renewal and extension to include the area for the third turf for Hawke's Bay Hockey, which was identified in the Park Island Master Plan and has been on the radar for some time. And the reason to include that third turf area, even though nothing is built on there at the moment, is to allow Hawke's Bay Hockey to apply for funding. So the issue is if they haven't got security of tenure, then they can't apply for funding. So that's why we're doing it that way. So basic renewal plus extension is what we're looking at here.
Do we have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I've got a question.
Councillor Tapani.
Deb's not a question directly, or it might be for you. I'll ask the question through you, Mr. Chair, to you. Just looking at that aerial image, could you confirm for me that what looks like a part of our stormwater network, so that drain running to the left of the image in the agenda, would give me the appearance of being an overflow area for the stormwater network. Could you confirm that this proposed development is not going to have any impact, or that's not one, that that's not a part of our stormwater network, and two, that this proposed development, which looks like it's going to be developing the edge of that waterway, is not going to have any negative or adverse effects on our intentions to continue to monitor and control water flowing through our region.
Through you, Mr Chair, you're correct. It used to be part of the drainage network. It is no longer. There's a few work-ons to get this third turf over the line. We've got some 33 kV lines that run through there as well. The stormwater from the third turf will be dealt with as part of the proposal, but that's not a functioning part of the stormwater network now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Wise.
Thank you, through the chair. Just with reference to those power lines, I know there has been ongoing conversations with Unison for quite some time about their removal and undergrounding. Do you know, is that close to coming to some sort of resolution, or that's going to be a bit of an ongoing issue?
Through you, Mr Chair. It is going to be an ongoing issue, primarily because of cost. So physically it's possible, but we're probably in the order of $300,000 or $400,000 to get that section underground. But that's one of the reasons for prompting this lease and the extension ofs, because it can be included in the funding applications to get those undergrounded. So, yeah, it'd be nice just to make those go away, but I'm thinking we're not going to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I was just going to make the comment that I think that is the where the typo was realigned and naturalised. That's the old stream. That's all I was mentioning.
Any further questions?
One more, if I may, Mr Chair.
Councillor Tapani.
Nice and easy one. Is this extension to meet current use and demand or projected growth? And if it is around projected growth, I'm wondering whether or not the current car parking has been considered and whether or not there's a follow-up around potential expansion of car parking.
Through you, Mr Chair, it's to meet, my understanding, it's like any other sport, they have these peak demand periods, and hockey's no different. They are a growth sport, or have been up until this year, which has been a bit of an odd bod. And so some car parking extensions are likely to be council's responsibility in terms of development of that area as well. So they are in part of the mix.
Okay, thank you.
Just not a question, but a comment that at pre-agenda, I asked Brian to communicate with Hawke to make sure that what we were extending in the lease land was meeting their future demands, and that has been confirmed. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And would someone like to move the resolution that pursuant to section 54(1)(c) of the Reserved Act to grant a lease to the Hawke's Bay Hockey Artificial Surface Trust for an area of land at Park Island Reserve, accommodating the existing facility plus including provision for a proposed new turf, that the term of the lease be for a period of 15 years with one right of renewal. Would someone like to move? Councillor McGrath, second. Councillor Simpson, would you like to speak to that, Councillor McGrath?
Yes, just briefly, us through the chair. Look, hockey are a very well organised sport in Hawke's Bay. They've had massive growth over the years. They've got the ability on their artificial turfs to play sort of all day, all night. And if you ever drive past there, they seem to be playing all night. So, if I've got to run out the child-friendly lens across it, an extra court means kids get home earlier at night when playing their sport as well. So, nothing but support for these guys, and wish we could have done it sooner.
Councillor Simpson.
Through you, Mr Chair, I think the advantage is it fits within our master planning. It's a good fit within the environment. There is room for the obvious around parking and other future needs. The advantage, I think, is having a facility like this will attract tournaments in the future, and will place us in a good space within that market for domestic or international tourism. So I think it's an excellent proposal.
Any other comment? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 4. Granting of easement, Nelson Park School. So, Deborah, I understand you're going to speak to this as well.
Sorry, folks, you've got me again in Brian's absence. This is a proposal we've been working on with Nelson Park School and Fairhaven School, who currently access Fairhaven via the road around Nelson Park, which is technically reserve and not road. So they're doing some developments in there to improve access and egress for folk that need to come in bigger vehicles. And my view is we need to tidy up so that they've got some security longer term to provide for that access. And the way to do that is to grant this easement. So that's what we're working on with them. It's a pretty solid proposal. The use is currently existing. We're basically trying to formalise that as they tidy up their, I suppose, site layout, for want of a better description. So that's what this one's all about.
Okay, I understand that a couple of the ward councillors have visited the site and have a number of questions in relation to that. So invite Councillor Mawson initially.
Thank you. Through the chair, I've just got one question. I see we're kind of solving a bit of a health and safety issue here, but we've created another by putting the curbing up to prevent the cars parking on the grass verge adjacent to the school there. Now, there were 12 cars there this morning, and I'm just asking if there is any sort of report done on any sort of impacts that would have, having not those cars being able to park there, and that Joel Street's a bit of a nightmare around school time. Just sort of thinking 12 cars, where would they park? I believe that would cause the other side of the school, Nelson Park School, to have issues with car parking and so forth.
Through you, Mr Chair, I have been down there with Tony Mills from our transportation team to have a look at it, because it's a bit of a madhouse, for want of a better description, particularly at pick-up and drop-off time. And one of the points of conflict is those cars pulling in and backing out through that area. And the view of the transportation team was we better to stop that and make it other than the vehicles who are going directly to the school to do the drop-off for the Fairhaven kids, we better to stop that other traffic. And in addition to that, stop that drive right down to the toilet block. So it's basically getting the cars out of there. There will be a push, but there wasn't particular concern about that from the transportation team, because those other areas are more set out to accommodate that backing in and out, whereas that area is just a bit untidy. So there are some work on there and some detail that will be worked through with the transportation team to make sure we don't make one problem go away and create another one.
Through the chair, I do get that, and that makes perfect sense, but as I say, like there was not a lot of car parks free.
Yep.
I'm just saying, well, if those 12 cars are there now, where would they go? And I get it.
Yep.
We're kind of trying to do the best scenario here, but yeah, just wondering if there was any,
Yeah. We will continue to work that through and make sure, as I say, we're not creating problems by solving problems.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
Just to clarify, Councillor Mawson and I went down this morning to have a look, and excuse me, spoke to the principal and the project director. So it seems like there's only 6 or 7 children, I think, go to the Fairhaven unit, and the suggested round drop-off proposal is, perfect for safety, and it will require one tree to go down, but it's not a huge issue, I don't think. But we all know that all-day parking is at a premium right across the city, and the 12 parks that were occupied today were all teachers from that school, and we just were concerned about where they would be able to park. There's no site parking on the actual Nelson Park School site, and yes, we would like if you and Tony Mills could perhaps have another look at that. As we all know, there's a huge amount of competition for all-day parking around the city ever since the gravel pit was removed. So it is an issue, I think, in terms of also safety around the drop-off in Joel Street too. Thanks.
Could I suggest that this particular item is around the granting of the easement, and that when this paper comes back to full council, that we have a supplementary some information regarding this issue of the parking that could be provided just to update councillors?
Yep, no problem. I'll get the transportation team to, they'll have some science around it, I'm sure, which we reserves folk are not so good at. So yeah, I'll get the transportation team to come back with specific responses to those issues of where the 12 cars would move to and what the implications are of them not parking in their current location.
Could we note that as an action from this committee? So when it comes to full council, that we have that information. Okay, any further? Councillor Tapani?
Just a follow-up question from Councillor Bogue around the tree that's being removed. Is there a tree being removed, and have we cross-referenced that with our heritage list?
Yeah, no, it's a small and insignificant tree, so we are relaxed about it.
I'm sure you would be.
Which I'm not always relaxed about removal of trees, I can assure you.
If it was a significant tree, I'm sure you wouldn't be recommending its
Jumping up and
removal.
down.
Any other questions? No. The officer's recommendation is that we resolve pursuant to Section 48 of the Reserves Act 1977 to approve the granting to Her Majesty the Queen for a public school an easement over an area of land in Nelson Park adjacent to the Nelson Park School. This is to allow a turning circle to be completed and to formalise a right-of-way over the access way already formed, incorporating the vehicle turning circle and running between the existing school entrance and Joel Street. Do I have someone to move that? Councillor Tapani, seconded Councillor Bogue. Do you wish to speak further?
No further comments, Mr Chair.
All those in favour? Sorry? Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just through the chair. While I support this going forward, the whole area there is just sort of chaos and mayhem. And I know that on a Friday afternoon in summer, there's about 160 plus kids turn up to play cricket as Nelson Park School's getting out. It's all happening at the same time. And this may actually be an opportunity for our roading guys to perhaps think a little bit further and clean up the whole area and make it more traffic friendly for all, not necessarily just one little group. But yeah, good opportunity for us.
Thank you.
So I can just add to that, because we have an arrangement whereby the school use Nelson Park as their green space. So the kids at all their breaks are sort of moving across that roadway, which is one of the reasons we're really keen to reduce vehicles in that area, because they block visibility and don't always behave as we think they're going to. So we're really conscious that we make that transition from the school across to that top end of Nelson Park as smooth and as safe as possible.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody else wish to speak? There being none, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Would someone like to move that we now move into public excluded? Councillor Tapani, seconded by Councillor Crown. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.